Hi, I'm Joseph Lidster, and you're listening to the Sirens of Audio.
This is not the end! This is only the beginning!
G'day audiophiles, welcome back. This is another episode of the Sirens of Audio. My name is Dwayne, I'm your host, and this time we will be discussing the latest Big Finish monthly range release, number 264. Ooh, only 11 to go before the monthly range is finished. It's one that I've been following for a long time, but I do understand why Big Finish have made the decision to go in a slightly different direction to the regular monthly releases and package things a little bit differently, make things a little bit easier for us consumers with such a backlog of material. I do understand what they're doing. So many of us were wanting them to go to 300 just to round it off, but that's just for us, for us fans who like to have round numbers and go a little bit crazy without them. I'm going to have joining me very shortly the writer of this month's audio, Scorched Earth, that is Chris Chapman. I was very privileged to be able to have a chat with him, so going to be able to share that with you in just a moment. Speaking of Chris Chapman, we all know that Chris is involved primarily with the documentaries on the Blu-ray extras and DVD extras, and has been for quite a number of years now. And I heard Chris do a podcast recently, I think it was in March this year, on a podcast called Something Who. So I recommend you go back and listen to that. They've put out a few episodes since then, but listen to Something Who. It's somethingwho.podbean.com. Get over there and have a listen to that. It goes really in depth into Chris Chapman's work on the extras. Going to be covering that a little bit in today's episode, but mainly talking about Scorched Earth and his writing work for Big Finish. It's got a feather in a few caps, has our Chris Chapman. So let's have a listen to the trailer for Scorched Earth right now.
From Big Finish Productions, Doctor Who, Scorched Earth.
Doctor, this is my time, isn't it? France during the war.
My dear Constance, we really should be going.
No, Doctor. Tell me, is this it? Is this the end of the war?
Do you hear that? It's like an animal! Shut up! Run faster! I can feel the fire! Please don't! Who are you, girl?
My name is Philippa Ramone, and I do not appreciate seeing defenceless young women abused by big burly men in front of a screaming mob. Whatever you think she's done, she does not deserve this. Nobody deserves this.
The fire is definitely not of this earth, though I see no match with anything else in collective Time Lord knowledge.
Oh, what do you mean, strike back? The war is ending.
Constance, they have shamed and broken my country. It may be that they have ruined it forever, that the France I loved is truly, truly gone. And that terrible favor deserves to be repaid.
You have us tied up here. But what does fire care about ropes and wooden barns? That demon has plans for us. For all of Germany.
Doctor, that plane...
It's heading this way, isn't it?
Very much so.
Incoming!
Big Finish. We love stories.
I'm speaking with Chris Chapman. He's the author of this month's Big Finish monthly release entitled Scorched Earth. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Dwayne. How are you?
I'm very well. Thank you so much for joining me. at this beautiful time of the evening for you in the UK.
And first thing in the morning for you, I hear. I'm so sorry you're up at 4 a.m. to do this.
No, that's
call.
okay.
The time zone first. I'm sorry.
The things we do for the love of Doctor Who, eh?
Absolutely.
So you're known primarily in Doctor Who fandom. We see your name come up a lot on the documentaries, Blu-ray features, other DVD features, and we've seen your name out there for many years. How did you get into that in the first place, Chris?
I guess I kind of grew up. I've been a fan of the show since the kind of late Colin, early Sylvester years. So I was kind of a fan who grew up when there wasn't a lot of Doctor Who on telly after '89, and grew up as a massive nerd for telly and for movies, and ended up. I thought I was going to be a movie journalist. I thought I was going to write film reviews for Empire or something, and actually ended up becoming a TV researcher and working for Channel 4 on archive shows. They used to do these 100 countdowns, like the 100 greatest family films and so on, which actually was really fun because I got to meet a lot of my heroes, people like Ray Harryhausen. We got to film with and learn all about these worlds and these films. And I started directing for telly, and then realised, blimey, the Doctor Who DVDs, they've got special features, haven't they? And people like Ed Stradling and Richard Molesworth and Steve Broster were making documentaries, and I thought, well, I'm doing this for a job. Why aren't I doing the Doctor Who ones as well? Because I love Doctor Who, and so in about 2008, I started pitching to Dan Hall and started making documentaries, and we did about 40 docs on the DVD range, and then it all ended, and we released it all. There wasn't anything left, and then I kind of got this call from Russell Minton a couple of years ago to say, why don't you come and do the Blu-ray docs? And we're in the middle of doing them, really. We're very busy, and it's a great gig because you're given a lot of creative freedom to explore Doctor Who in ways that kind of push the boundaries a bit and hopefully feel quite fresh and fun. But it's from the heart, and actually getting into Big Finish from there was completely corrupt, on every level, in that I worked with Nick Briggs a couple of times on the documentaries. I got him to do the voice of the Daleks. The Daleks narrated our Death to the Daleks making of, and Nick did it all in character and was amazing about it. It was lovely about it. And I said afterwards, do you think I could ever pitch a Big Finish? Because I've written, for the screen, and I sent him a short film that I'd written that had won a few awards, and he was lovely about that. And he let me pitch. And then I didn't pitch for 2 years out of busyness and laziness and fear. And then I pitched the memory bank to Alan Barnes. And luckily Alan was trying to find stories for a anthology set all about memory. So it was purely good luck, really. Good luck and corruption mixing together to get in on the audios. But I've loved it. I've worked on about 9 or so now over the last 3 years or so, and it's been an awful lot of fun. I really enjoy them, definitely. So it's nice to mix it with the documentary work, because on a documentary, I love it, but you're often crossing your fingers and hoping that somebody might say a certain type of thing or react a certain type of way. Sometimes they surprise you, absolutely, but you're also kind of hoping, I hope they give me that. I hope they articulate that. And then you come off one of those shoots into a script, and suddenly you can make the characters say that, and you can be a bit of a fascist, really, and force words out of somebody's mouth. So I find it I like to go from one to the other and bounce back and forth. It's quite nice. So documentary, I think you learn about life, and then scripts, you can kind of channel what you've learned into a story. So it's a nice balance, I hope, definitely. Yeah,
meeting Harryhausen as a classic film fan, that would have been such a thrill.
Yeah. Oh, I the weird thing is the rest of the crew I was with weren't really that bothered. And I was kind of nerding out in the corner going, it's Ray Harryhausen. And he must have been in his kind of mid to late 80s at that point. And he brought along a little black coffin about that big for the interview. And I said, well, what's that, Ray? What have you got in your coffin? And he opened it during the interview. And it was one of the original Jason and the Argonaut skeletons, the proper articulated skeletons that Jason has to fight at the end, and that amazing sequence. And it was one of the originals. And he took it out on camera and you could still move its limbs, and it was that proper Wallace and Gromit kind of move it a bit, take a shot, move it a bit, take a shot kind of approach. So I was just like a pig in shit, really. I loved meeting Ray, and so, really it's that kind of thing. It's one of the Doctor Who's, it's most exciting when you get to meet your heroes and then just hopefully put them at ease and have a fun time with them. It's always fun.
Yeah, a couple of standouts for me in the Blu-ray documentary range would be the Matthew Waterhouse one, for sure. A lot of people talk about that. He seems like such a lovely guy for a poor actor who's probably had a lot of stick over the years for his character. Oh. What a lovely guy.
Yeah. Well, I think Matthew probably has had a bit of stick over the years. I think even at the time when the show went out, I think there were some parts of the audience who, I don't know, maybe saw themselves reflected in Adric or just didn't like Adric. And a lot of people love Adric, but he's always been Marmite. And I think it was lovely making that film because it felt like we were peeling back a bit of a different level of Matthew and really getting to know him a bit better. And I thought he was quite zen in a way in that film. He comes across as a very contented, happy man, I think. I don't know what you thought watching it, but I just thought this guy's in a really good place, and it was lovely for Toby to kind of hijack that and kind of stow away for a weekend and share that with him, really.
The other one I really enjoyed was the John Nathan Turner one, which I've actually spoken of previously on the podcast, Showman. It actually was quite a stirring documentary on because I'm sure when it comes to John Nathan Turner, he's a very polarizing character. There's a lot you could say about him, either one way or the other, but I think you put it in a very human way. We got to see the man as a real human being, and I think it helped me personally relate to people like Chris Chibnall, who at the moment is receiving a lot of backlash has received a lot of backlash from fans online, just as back in the day John Nathan Turner got backlash too. So for that purpose, I really enjoyed Showman as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of the time on those films, and we did a similar kind of approach with the Liz Sladen biography that we did recently at Our Sarah Jane. I kind of want those films to kind of walk you in the shoes of those people. I don't really want to turn up and judge John or judge Liz and tell you exactly what kind of person they are. I don't want to write any voiceover for it that spells it out. I just want you to kind of experience their life, and that's all the visual treatment that we do, where we return to locations and we glide through locations that are still there, that were, where John grew up or went to school or, started at the BBC or whatever. And I hope they are compassionate, those films, and the fact that we can, treat a Marmite figure like John, again, quite Marmite, with, compare that with someone like Liz, who's kind of universally loved, but hopefully we came at them with the same kind of fairness, that you just say, well, let's just tell you what happened through the words of the people that were there, and let you figure it out, let you decide. But I think John's life, is a story of two halves, is a story of an amazing rise that tells you so much about telly, and equally this second half fall that also tells you so much about telly. And that was what really attracted me to it, the kind of the Greek kind of epic of John's life. In a way, it is a tragedy in a way that I don't think Elizabeth's life is a tragedy. I think Elizabeth's life is cut short, but has this amazing triumphant final act, that makes it very powerful in a different way. So they were really, I'd love us to do a lot more like that. I've said before, that I'd love to do a proper big Pat Troughton biography, real Pat one. And I'd love to shine a light on some of the companions who died too young, people like Michael Craze and Ian Marter, and even lesser known people like kind of Adrian Hill, I'd love us to do something on, really. So hopefully that's just the beginning of the Showman one.
You mentioned the Sarah Jane documentary, which I haven't yet seen because I'm waiting for the Australian release of the Blu-ray, which I don't think is released until next month. So I haven't seen that yet. However, the big talk about that documentary was Tom Baker's reactions within it. What was it like being in that room with Tom Baker, a legendary figure? It seemed, I saw the little clip that found its way online, and It must have been such an emotional moment.
Yeah, it was an amazing day, really, and I didn't know what to think when I saw that clip had kind of gone a bit viral, because I kind of thought, well, don't watch it out of context, watch the film, and I kind of felt a bit bad for Tom that it was kind of going out there on its own. Luckily, people, I think, were being very sensitive with it and saying and feeling nice things in reaction to it, but I did feel for Tom a bit because I thought that's something that you kind of want the context for, I think, which the rest of the film gives you. We had a lovely day with Tom. We filmed him quite close to his neck of the woods, and I'd interviewed him once before when we did a Sharda making of, and he was on really good form for that. So I guess we all kind of went in feeling quite relaxed and not being too worried about, meeting a big hero or whatever. We just thought, well, it's Tom, and and if Tom wants to talk about something, he will, and if he doesn't want to talk about it, he just won't. His agent just won't say yes to the interview, so he does only what he wants to do. So I think you're guaranteed, if he does say yes, then he will engage and be on form. And we were just lucky, I think, that the subject we were talking about, to talk about Liz with Tom, is something he has such attachment to the memory of Liz and to what she represents in his life, in his Doctor Who time, that I was just there kind of gently prodding and Tom just needed to be guided from one bit to the next bit. But there wasn't anything special that we did, that I can lay claim to. I think Tom just was in a really good place to talk about Liz. And I think it probably surprised him, I think, to revisit some of those memories. We tried to talk to him about things that don't always get talked about that much, so their Liverpool connection, both being Scousers, but kind of sort of secret Scousers, that you wouldn't necessarily realise immediately that they're both Scouse, and what it meant to them to go back and turn on the Blackpool lights, just north of Liverpool, when they were both at the height of their fame. So I guess we were trying to talk to him about things that he doesn't always get asked about. So maybe that opened up the conversation and opened up a few memories for him that felt fresh, and I think he really liked watching the clips again, having something to bounce off. So it was lovely to put that together, and I think it's really struck a chord with people, because we all, I think, the vast majority of Doctor Who fans have a huge inbuilt affection for Tom, and when you see one of your heroes upset, feeling emotion like that, I think it's very hard to watch, but hopefully in a good way, because it comes from love, it comes from the affection he had for Liz. It's not I don't think you're seeing Tom a broken man. I think you're seeing him remember love, and that's a beautiful thing that he let us see and let us put in the film. Because he could have easily turned around at the end of that interview and said, that bit when I got upset, could you not use that? And I would have had to have said yes. I would have had to say, okay, I won't then, because I'm not an arsehole. but that was very good of Tom to put that out there, I think, and be happy for the world to see that.
That's certainly the impression I got. I didn't get the impression that he was heartbroken. Well, as such, not in a negative way. It was a positive. I only saw it as a positive, put it that way.
Yeah.
But do you see what I did there? You mentioned Big Finish before, how you kind of got in through the side door. I've been talking to you for about 20 minutes about the Blu-ray releases, and the main focus that I wanted to talk about was this month's Big Finish main range release called Scorched Earth, which I took issue with because I once wrote a movie treatment called Scorched Earth, so I was wondering whether it would have been the same. I was ready with my lawyers on the side.
Okay.
But fortunately, no, it was completely different to my idea. However, this is the second. I don't know if you follow Big Finish at all, particularly the monthly range, but this is the second one this year that is set at around about the same time. Earlier in the year, Helen Goldwyn wrote an episode called Subterfuge, which was set around the same time, but in England, whereas this one's in France. So was this a completely clean pitch by you, or were you given some of the basic bones to work with for this one?
No, this one, I mean, it varies with my work on Big Finish. And some stories, like I did Hosts of the Wirren for the unit range, and Warzone as well, with Peter Davison, and on those, the script editors will come to me and say, here's the bare bones. Could you do a unit Wirren story, or could you do a big race of death with Peter? But on this one, on Scorched Earth, I pitched it cold, so to speak. And it's coincidence, actually, that it's ended up in the same year as Helen's story. That I just think that's testament to the fact that particularly World War II is just an inexhaustible bed of human stories. I think that we will never run out of telling stories about that era. And I don't think that's patriotism or sentimentality or nostalgia. I just think that an incredible millions and millions and millions of incredibly powerful human stories happened in the space of 6 years, and I think we'll always be going back to them. But no, I had a document of different story ideas, and I was pitching one to John Ainsworth, the script editor on the range, on the Colins stories. And I was saying the core of it was that my grandfather, Bill, he was born Walter Curtis. And like a lot of people in that generation, he grew up being known from a different name and became Billy and Bill. But Walter Curtis, as there is a Walter Curtis in the story, he in real life was late onto D-Day. You know, he came in as a mobile radar operator. He landed on D-Day plus 27. I made it a bit earlier in the story to D-Day plus 21, but he always used to tell me stories about how he kind of missed the fight, really. You know, he arrived and all the bloody work had been done, and the focus of his job was to man the radar posts to report back about the fighters up in the air, and they progressed slowly to Berlin. And then he was around for about 6 months in the peacekeeping efforts kind of after the end of the war, and he would talk about going into French villages and that kind of reception that they received. He had an amazing box of mementos that he kept, of little things he'd found along the way, and really interesting black market things like kind of German uniform insignias, you know, swastikas that the guys had obviously been handing around in the mess, you know, and had brought back. And I just thought it was a really interesting period in time, you know, that feeling of what do human beings do when the fight is done but not quite done. You know, for France, the war is sort of over. You know, it doesn't end for months and for a year or so. But for those people in those villages, it must have felt like it was over after that occupation. And I thought there might be something interesting to write about rage and anger in peacetime. And I guess this idea I've always clung on to, that I've always thought that you can't. I really strongly believe that you can't ruin things. I think things can be. Bad things can be happen and people can do bad things, but I think the idea of being ruined, the idea of something being made to be worthless and made to be ruined, I reject. And I think there's always hope, you know, and it's always possible that something good can come out of something bad, that somebody who seems bad is capable of good. And that kind of is a motto, if you like, of the story. I think, you know, that the characters who think things are tarnished and ruined and worth destroying or cleansing, you know, I don't agree with those characters, and the story kind of explores that, I guess.
Yeah, I sense that theme throughout the story as well, and there's two elements really. There's the alien menace, and there's also the relationship, which I found extremely interesting, between Constance and Flip, two different characters from two different eras in history, dealing with the same subject in two completely different ways. And I found myself at first being on the side of Constance and thinking, well, Flip was overreacting. And then by the end of it, Constance had turned around and had kind of come and seen Flip's point of view. Did you have fun working with that concept, weaving that through the story? I found that a really enjoyable aspect to this story.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I mean, I wrote for Flip and Constance on Colin Baker's story called The Middle a year or two ago, and I really loved writing for them. I listened to a lot of their other stories around that time, and I thought that it's lovely that they, I think I've always said that when they brought them together as companions, that you kind of expect sometimes that they're going to emphasize, you know, the differences between two people like that, and that they will fight or they will be jealous over the Doctor or something. And actually I love the fact that when they wrote Quicksilver, that they got on like a house on fire, and they immediately had this lovely relationship, and it's kind of ever so slightly maternal or kind of big sisterly from Constance, but they're very much interesting equals, and they're, I think, delighted by the differences between them where they spot them. And I just thought actually it was a good time to pitch a story that looked at the fact that they get on so well, but then to say actually these are two women from incredibly different generations, with incredibly different perspectives, and wouldn't it be interesting to tell a story that kind of revealed that to each other? That they suddenly realized, oh, we do get on, but we are really different, aren't we? We come from really different worlds. And I think there is logic to what they're both saying. I think for Constance, I saw somebody post on a forum, they didn't think Constance had previously had some kind of racism built into her, that she didn't hate the Nazis. And I thought that kind of missed it, because I'm kind of saying, anybody living through something like World War II has a completely understandable built-in hatred that will fester away and be a big part of their perspective. You're not going to be able to live through something as awful as that and not resent your enemy, and the people who are making you fight and lose your friends. So it made perfect sense to me that Constance would feel like the Germans deserve justice, and that sometimes that justice can be harsh, but that's what people have lived through. That's what the French had lived through, and they deserved a sense of retaliation. But I think in contrast, Flip is a very modern woman and particularly sees it as a crime, as an attack and assault on a young woman, and comes at it from that point of view. I hope that the story is balanced enough that you don't feel immediately that one of them's in the wrong. You kind of think, well, I get why you would feel like that. And that's the important thing. I'm not trying to say, I don't want the audience to really feel like they have to join a side. I just want them to think, I get why you feel that way. And that's how the Doctor feels. He ultimately would preach compassion, I think, in every circumstance. And so ultimately he wants Constance to let go of hate, because the Doctor's he's not the kind of character who likes to keep hold of hate, and so ultimately he wants Constance to let go of that. But he loves her enough as a friend, and he understands her enough to let her find her way and not to judge her too harshly, I think. So it was a really interesting thing to play, and I think it's been lovely that it's got the reaction that it has so far, in terms of those characters. And I know that Lisa and Miranda loved performing those scenes, because there's a lot to get your teeth into, I think. And hopefully it won't just be a done in one, hopefully we can, address those their relationship in that kind of interesting way in the future as well, I hope.
I see a similarity to what you've done there in that story to something that has happened in fandom, and I seem to mention this every time I come on. And that's I see a similarity between what you've done in the story and the fan reaction to the Talons of Wang Chiang. So people in those days, in the 70s, when the Talons of Wang Chiang, and even myself, I'm a slightly older generation, we never thought a second thing of it. But the younger generation these days seem to be quite outraged at some of the contents of Talons, which to me and many other fans it's like the holy grail of Doctor Who stories. So in a sense, it's a similar thing there. Two different worldviews sort of colliding, and I think you've tried to with your story, tried to help us to see that we can understand each other rather than either condemn one or the other.
I think that's the key thing. It's understanding. With Talons, I think that the best thing both sides of that argument can do is understand each other. And I think where that argument breaks down is when one side, either side, feels like the other side is trying to say you can't have this thing, or your opinion is not valid, or the one side assumes, what, do you never want me to watch this story again that I love? And you think, well, actually I don't think either side is trying to kind of say you can't tell me this, you can't have this discussion. I just think in that situation everybody has to listen to the other side, and understand it, and I think both of those viewpoints are valid, because I think you have to watch something like, whether it's Talons or whether it's Birth of a Nation or Dumbo or Short Circuit or anything else that has cultural aspects that have dated badly. And there's no doubt that Talons has dated badly. I think, and anything like that, you still have to be able to look at it and say, I understand why it happened. I can see the context of the time that it was made, and I will weigh that up and take that into account. But equally, I think people reacting to it now are having a modern perspective on it, and you always need to be able to encourage a modern reading of your piece of fiction or whatever it is. That keeps things interesting. You can't say all the opinions about Talons have been had, everybody needs to shut up now. You just have to keep listening to how a text is being read for a new generation. That's how this works. So yeah, I maybe it is quite similar, because I think my message would be, can you just listen to each other? Can you just try and understand each other a bit better and not go to extremes on this? Because you both deserve to be listened to. And that's the way I'd feel about Constance and Flip as well, that they do both deserve to be listened to and understood.
What's it like writing for Colin Baker? You've written for 3 different Doctors now. I don't think we've seen your Tom Baker episodes released yet, but out of the 3, how would you compare writing for Colin as opposed to the others?
I really like writing for Colin, and I think there's always going to be a connection in my head, because Colin's the first Doctor I ever remember watching on telly, and they're very. I was very young. I think I must have been 4 when Trial of a Time Lord was on, and I have very vivid memories of people, of that, particularly that woman at the end of Vervoids 2, when they go in and she's half Vervoid down the middle, really, really, and then Perry and Mindwarp getting her head shaved, and horrible imagery. Everybody thinks of Trial as being kind of jolly and campy and panto and Pip and Jane, but there's some really kind of messed up imagery in it as well. And so I always felt that connection to Colin. And writing for Colin, I think it's just really fun. I think his Doctor has such a range of, he's kind of erudite and he's a raconteur, so you can have fun with the language, and you can give it a little bit of Pip and Jane. You can embrace that alliteration and so on, and have fun with that. But we know that his Doctor can go dark. We know that he can get angry. I'm writing one at the moment when he gets very angry, and that's in him. And I think Big Finish have done so well to make a connection between him and his companions. You saw that in Evelyn, and you definitely see it in Constance and Flip, and obviously with Perry and Mel as well. But there's a genuine care and affection that Colin plays, and I think that's great, for the characters in a play. So I love writing for Colin, and I don't know, it sounds a bit wanky, but I think I feel when I write for Colin that his voice kind of comes quite naturally onto the page, so it feels it's quite a fun, relaxed thing. I don't have to strain too much to find that voice, so that's always pleasant, definitely. And I think I'd find it in a way. I don't know which Doctors would be hardest to write for, really. I think Tom, I felt the weight of the years, with Tom, and thought, and also Tom, there have been so many Toms on screen, haven't there? I really wanted to write for kind of season 13, 14 Tom, and have him be quite, capable of being grumpy and capable of being a bit more alien. So I think with some Doctors, you have to pick which version of this Doctor am I going to write for. But I'm quite happy writing for any of them, really, because it's amazingly exciting to think I'm going to write this, and then one of my heroes is going to say it, and that's still a thrill, definitely, and I hope it'll always be.
Yeah, I've got to say that Colin Baker was probably my hero when it came to... I was always pretty obsessed with Doctor Who, but it wasn't until season 22, I think Revelation of the Daleks really stood out to me when I was a kid, when I saw that on TV for the first time. I was in high school at the time, so I remember the devastation I felt when, after Trial of a Time Lord, I wasn't going to get any more Colin. What do you think was... He's been so good on audio. What do you think was his main drawback on television, as a television Doctor?
I think that there is a lot to love in that era, and you mentioned Revelation, which I watched on when BBC Two repeated it in the UK in about 92, and I loved it. And Varos is such an interesting script, and I do think Trial's got lots of high points, and even things like Attack of the Cybermen, which has got quite a mixed up script, has this great kind of visual flair a lot of the time, But ultimately, I think Colin was crippled partly on screen by what was going on behind the scenes. I think that the kind of falling out, sadly, between John Nathan Turner and Eric Saywood, I think, becomes the story of that era when it shouldn't be. I think unfortunately, I don't think John Nathan Turner should pick costumes for people, and I think that his efforts to probably mirror Colin after him as a fashion sense were misplaced. And I think John came to realise that. I'm sure Colin would say that straight off the bat. And I think all of that mess means that I don't think the scripts for Colin are as strong as they should be. And I think if Colin had been luckier with what was happening behind the scenes on the show, in the writing and the producing, then I think he would have been much more successful. I don't think Colin's to blame for that at all. I just think the scripts weren't strong enough and weren't as good as Peter was given and weren't as good as Sylvester was ultimately given. And I think that's a real shame for Colin. And I think ultimately I don't care about that because I love his Doctor. But I think if there's a disconnect with Joe Public, with the average person on the street, then it's caused by that. And I hope that Big Finish has done some good in galvanizing love for Colin's Doctor and has really shown, hopefully, the broad range of what that Doctor can do. And I think just like they've done for Paul, that the Eighth Doctor has an era that was denied at the time. I think that's where Big Finish really excel and say, actually, we're going to make our own rules up and do the thing that we wanted to do. And I think Colin's been a massive beneficiary of that, definitely.
Do you think it's that we don't see the costume on audio that has a lot to do with it?
I think it probably helps. I think when you're doing the big emotional bits, it would probably be a distraction. I always try and get a reference or two into the script about Colin's costume, because unlike some of the other Doctors, you think, well, there's no way that people would ignore it. If he's meeting soldiers in World War II, they're going to say something because it's a big deal. And I'm writing a new one at the moment where he's in disguise at one point, and I kind of have to make that really clear as to why people aren't responding to him in a kind of, oh, is it fancy dress kind of way, because there's no way his Doctor can be incognito, is there? It's such a statement. But I think, yes, I know Colin has said he would have loved a stripped back kind of black costume, and there's the later kind of blue costume, the blue version of his coat that's used in, I think did it start in the comic strips, and it's ended up going into a few different bits of media. I wouldn't change his costume now. That is Colin's Doctor, but it would have been fascinating to see a more subtle costume, maybe along the lines of what Sylvester ends up in minus the question marks. I think it would have been really interesting to see Colin, whether that would have changed minds, I don't know. But on audio, I don't miss it, I'd say.
Subtlety in the 80s, it's a bit of a oxymoron, isn't it? There was one slight reference that I picked up in Scorched Earth that I wanted to mention, and Flip actually refers to it. When she meets the French resistance, she has a little reference to Hello, Hello. Were you a fan of that show too?
I love Hello, Hello. And I did fight with myself and think, would Flip know what Hello, Hello was? Because Flip is very young. I think Flip is meant to be kind of 19 or so, isn't she? But then it's been repeated loads in the UK. It was on telly like about 3 or 4 years ago. So I'm assuming Flip's parents probably watched it and sat her down in front of it. And it's enough of a cultural reference point. If she'd made a Secret Army reference, it might have been a bit more unbelievable. But I love Hello, Hello. And I thought it's good to kind of invoke it in this kind of story, because I think the viewer will immediately think French resistance, French village, cafes and stuff. Oh, it's very Hello, Hello, isn't it? So I thought I'll cut them off at the pass and get it in there as a reference. And there's a lot of things I'm kind of referencing a bit. I mean, I went back and I'm a big World War II buff anyway, but I reread a lot of Anthony Beevor and stuff like that and rewatched certain episodes of The World at War and other docs I could lay my hands on. And the other thing that ended up being a really big reference point was the great, really misunderstood but amazing Michael Mann film, The Keep, from 1983. I think it's 1983, which, if you haven't seen it, see it. Seek it out. It's quite tricky to find, but it's Michael Mann's second film that he made straight after Thief, but still about a decade before he made Heat. And the really interesting thing about The Keep is it's set in, I think it's in the Carpathian Mountains, I think. And it's all about a battalion or platoon of Nazi soldiers who come to this castle, to this keep, and find that it's haunted by something that kind of sees their sins, and sees their evil and does something about it. And I thought the really interesting thing about the film is that for the most part of that film, barring Scott Glenn's kind of wacko character, most of the main characters that you follow are these German soldiers, and I think it really the film has a very balanced attitude to them, which I agree with, that it doesn't say German soldiers, the average German soldier, it doesn't say the average German soldier is evil. It says the average German soldier is probably highly messed up, doing the wrong thing, following the wrong orders, brainwashed and making bad choices, but they're not evil. There are obviously a lot of genuinely evil people who wore swastikas, and we know who those monsters are. But I really do believe that the average German soldier was not necessarily one of those monsters. I think those monsters did exist in the ranks, but I think if you picked a random German soldier, I think he was probably just a scared young man, and I don't think it's right to demonize every single member of a whole nation's military. And so in a way, I hope that the story kind of reflects that you have, I was listening to a lot of the Keep soundtrack to Channel 8, and so the German soldiers in it, and I've seen quite a bit of debate online about this, which is really good that people are talking and discussing it and having a viewpoint. And some people are saying, should the Doctor be siding with Nazis? And I kind of, certainly myself, I feel those characters in the script, I'm certainly not saying that they are evil, because I don't believe that, I don't believe that they were necessarily evil, but they admit themselves that they have done awful things and they have sins and crimes that should be accounted for. And the Doctor comes into it with his normal compassion of saying, Nazis aren't, every soldier wasn't a Nazi, but the soldiers kind of correct him and say, actually, you're being a bit childish about this. We know what we've done, we know that we've committed crimes. And so they're living with that sin, and the fact that the fire demon is chasing them is kind of a metaphor for that guilt and that responsibility for what they've done. But I also wanted that sense that it is still possible for somebody who's committed awful acts to do some good and to not correct or fix or remove their guilt, but to do something that helps and not to be lost, not to be ruined. I saw somebody say that they were assuming they were high-ranking soldiers because one of them ends up in a car that he says he drove into Paris, but actually, they're not intended as high-ranking soldiers. That one of them's an officer, the others are just normal grunts. And we don't say that he owns the flash car. We just say that he drove into Paris and it might have been the chauffeur. He might have been driving with friends. We don't say that he's. I think somebody was saying he must be a high rank kind of Nuremberg level monster, and the Doctor's siding with a monster. That's really not certainly not what I'm intending to say. But I am trying to say these are people, and everybody on both sides of the war were people, and we need to have a little bit of understanding and empathy for what they were living through, and so it's not black and white. It's not good and bad, even though with World War II it's more tempting to see it that way, because there were monsters. There were more monsters on one side, absolutely, than there were on the other side, and so it's tempting to see the whole thing as good versus evil. But I don't think it's that simple. I don't think it's ever that simple. And Constance says, it's not black and white. It is messy, and that's what we were trying to reflect. So I hope there's a lot of sources that I'm trying to put in there to kind of to get into the mix. And a lower low, to come back to your question, a lower low was absolutely one of them. I would have probably put in a kind of good mooning reference if I thought Flip could have got away with saying it, but I didn't go quite that far. But I'm glad that you're a lower low fan over in Tasmania.
I would have loved to have heard Colin say, "You stupid woman." Yeah, that would have been good.
You're a stupid woman. I bet he could do a good one of those.
He would.
And of course, Carmen Severa is Doctor Who royalty as well, isn't she? She did too, didn't she?
She did.
Madam Edith is in The Celestial Toymaker, and she's in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, isn't she? So
she is. Yep.
I don't think Arthur Bostrom's ever been in Who, has he? We've never had Officer Crabtree.
I don't think so.
We had Guy Siner.
Yes.
Guy Siner was in Genesis, isn't he? And there's that lovely behind-the-scenes story that we told in The Greatest Show in the Galaxy making of, that they were filming in the big tent next to where Alolo was being shot, and then there's a fire alarm and they all end up in the car park together in costume, and people took photos. And I think when that set of photos got sent over to me from the designer, I just thought, this is my dream mashup. If you could do, why could Big Finish do an Alolo license? Could they? I guess we've not got Renee anymore, have we? We'd have to recast Renee and Edith and a few others, but maybe one day.
So we went from Scorched Earth to Scorched Car Park. So yeah, cool. No, a very, very worthy addition to the main range, which has just been announced over the last couple of days that the main range is coming to an end. So you got a few in there, Chris.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting development, isn't it? Because they've been talking, I know Nick and Benji on the podcast have been talking about it for years, that the main range is going to end. And really, I saw something saying the main range is ending, which makes it sound a lot more dramatic and negative than it is. I think actually, if Big Finish do it right, then it will be really good because it gives you so much more flexibility. I think I find this when I pitch, that sometimes some stories just aren't meant to be 4 parts long. You know, you can feel yourself saying, oh, God, this is a 3-parter, but I'm going to have to make it look like a 4-parter. And you've seen the range diversify into, like we did with Warzone, where you've got 2 2-parters on the same release. And I think that's really nice. But actually 3 parts is a lovely Doctor Who size. 3-act structure, kind of 70 minutes or so, I guess, of material. When they do 2-parters, they work. But I think the box sets, that approach will allow so much more flexibility in terms of the way you tell a story, that suddenly you can have a 5-part Colin Baker, you can have a 3-part Colin Baker, you can have a little 1-parter, you know, like a Mission to the Unknown equivalent or whatever. I hope it gives the range a load more flexibility, and also allows you to make. I think there'd always be a worry if you did a trilogy like we've just done with Colin and Flip and Constance, that you think, well, can these 3 stories really connect? Because what if people are just dipping in to one of the 3? Will that put people off? But in a box set, I don't think you want them all to interconnect in a super serialized way. But within one box set, you can definitely have huge threads that kind of cross over into that. And that's really exciting, that you've got that option, if that's right for the story. I'm writing a Colin at the moment, which I think is just a normal main range. I don't think it's for a box set. And that's a one with Colin, and it's a kind of semi-historical one again. And this is one that Colin has asked for in a way. He didn't ask for me particularly, but he said, I've always wanted to see a story where this happens. And I think he said that to David Richardson, and David Richardson said that to John Ainsworth. And then John came to me and said, would you like to write this thing that Colin's always wanted to do? So that's what we're doing now, is the thing that Colin's always wanted to do. And I'm in the process of, I think it's going to happen, that writing for a different range for a box set with a character who, well, with a kind of a very different type of character in it. So that will be quite fun as well. So I'm working on those 2 at the moment, and then I need to get some more pictures in, really. But it's such a balancing act to try and not destroy my life by taking on too many films and too much telly and the scripts as well. So I'll try and get a balance where I can, so as not to go crazy.
I really enjoyed the vague way you put that second thing that you're working on there in such a way that you didn't breach your confidentiality clause at all.
Well, I do worry a bit because I think Big Finish are, rightly so, quite secretive, and they feel very strongly they want to put a press release out, and that's the thing that announces what happens, and I want to do what they tell me to, basically.
Oh, I would too. I would do exactly the same.
So I'm happy saying it's a Colin, but they wouldn't want me to say anything else, so I won't. But I will. So at some point we can talk about anything to do with it, but not yet.
Chris Chapman, thank you so much for having a chat with me about all things Doctor Who, both in audio and your documentary work. It's been a pleasure and a privilege. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been lovely to talk to you. Thank you for getting up so early in the morning. And hello, Tasmania. I love that there are Doctor Who fans everywhere in the world, so I hope Tasmania is enjoying Doctor Who right now.
Yes, Chris, we certainly are. We are enjoying Doctor Who everywhere. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Sirens of Audio. Hope you have enjoyed it. Dear listener, we're supposed to refer to you in the singular, aren't we, to make it sound more personable. But really, podcasters want hundreds, if not thousands of people listening. So I hope there's listeners, not just a listener. But if there is only one, that's okay too. We do this for love. If you want to contact me for some feedback, you can do so through our various channels. We're on Twitter at Audio Sirens. Facebook, you just do a search for the Sirens of Audio. You can contact me via email, which is sirensofaudio@gmail.com, and our website is sirensofaudio.com. And remember, until next time, folks, in the immortal words of Sylvester McCoy, you must listen to audio drama, because audio drama